All right. Watch this, then I want to talk about it. You get to your crumble count. Thank you. Crumble count. Thank you.
Isn't that the Harry Potter font?
Conquerors of the useless. That's what we were. We had no set itinerary. We'd spend 250 days a year sleeping in a sleeping bag somewhere in the mountains somewhere or on a beach in Mexico, whatever. And then, you know, you steal fruit off of trees and killing porcupines and ground squirrels, getting a little protein that way. We had a whole life in the outdoors. You realize that you have a sense of responsibility to protect these wild places.
Last time this far south, I spent 43 nights sweltering alone inside a mosquito-infested tent. After a long flat spell, some expats dragged me to a whorehouse in the middle of the desert. We had mescal for breakfast. Got sick for a week because of bad river water. But man, I love this place.
So that movie came out in like 2009, and my buddy Dino, who is Greta's husband, Greta lives, her room's right here. They live right across the street from us. But I was living in an apartment on Market Street at the time, and we watched that trailer, and we said to ourselves, we need an adventure. Okay, Trace, can you please get back to your seat? And Zach, can you get back to your seat? I don't care.
Zach, get back to your seat.
Yeah, Jack, can you get back to your seat?
Jack, you had to know.
Okay, so we decided, we saw the trailer and we needed an adventure. So what we did was we put a map on the wall and we got a dart out and we said wherever that dart lands, we're gonna spin ourselves around, we're gonna throw it at the map, and boom, wherever it hits, that's where we're going. That was gonna be our adventure after we watched this trailer of this movie. Well, landed right in the middle of Kansas We looked all around. There was nothing we could see that would be cool at all to do Kansas surf. If any of you have
Do it again.
friends in Kansas. So we were like, okay, maybe this is a bad idea, but we still need an adventure. So what we ended up doing was we were looking for someplace cool and someplace different. And we settled on this island in the middle of Lake Superior. Okay, so here it is. This is a national park called Isle Royale National Park. This line, magical line, is Canada. So it's actually closer to Canada. You can see some of the land from Canada from that island. And then this is the UP of Michigan. So you get here, drive up to Copper Harbor, okay, in the UP. So this is the UP of Michigan, okay. This is still Wisconsin. You drive up here, okay, you get up to this point, you drive on this boat, or you get on this boat and you get to go to this island. And it was one of the coolest places I've ever been in my life. In fact, if you look on the worldwide interwebs, it says that, first of all, more people visit Yellowstone National Park in a day than people visit Isle Royale in a year. And but more people go back to Isle Royale than any other national park. I mean, I can't tell you if I could prove that data, but that's a fact that they like to say up here at that point. What was that, Sam?
Is this the place with the wolves?
So this is the place with the wolves. So we went. Yeah, I'm gonna show you just some pictures with it was me, Dino, Greta, and Hannah. And then we decided to go back and we took the boys. And so this was in 2017, and we just truly fell in love with this place. In fact, Greta and Dino have been there, I think, 4 times now. They ended up getting married there, which was really cool. But it's crazy because there's not that many people. It's not the easiest place to get to. This is a real rare orchid called a Ramshorn orchid. We won't get into all that, but there's the boys. We're on a boat. They were pretty excited. So this was a few years ago. So they're not as they're a lot bigger now than they were in this picture. For the most part, there's not a lot of housing. There's a small little hotel, or we stayed in what they're called housekeeping cabins. And it used to be housing for the housekeepers that would take care of the rooms in the hotel, but now they rent them out. Okay, so we, the first time we went, we did not stay in a housekeeping cabin, but we decided because the boys were there, they would not like to stay in a tent at that age. So this was our place. This is our view kind of outside of the place. And it's a pretty magical spot. Now I took a picture of this because I was pretty excited about seeing a wolf. The first time we were there, Hannah saw one. None of the rest of us did. We did not even see moose, but it's the longest running predator-prey relationship study in the history of ecology. Here's where we stayed first time. These are little shelters, okay? And if you look, they're pretty crazy because they've just got screens in them. So the screens are open at all times. It gets pretty cold in there at night, okay? But it's a great place to stay. We would put our tent up in there. And they were kind of peppered throughout the park. The park is only 50 miles long. Here's the boys. They were excited about bringing their transformers there. Okay, you can rent boats. There's lighthouses. It's cool. But I want you to look. This is pretty exciting. So any guesses what the boys are picking up there?
Is that rabbit poop?
That is moose poop. And they were very excited to see moose poop. And then they picked it up and played with it and smelled it a little bit. Okay. Oh yeah, there's Linus. I was like, do you want me to give you the moose poop? And no, he did not want any of that. Okay, so then we found this little cave called Susie's Cave. We did get there, and Ira was disappointed because Susie wasn't in it. I don't know if he thought it was going to be a person that lived inside the cave, but he said, "Where's Susie?" You can get there by boat, or you can get there by seaplane. Seaplane's pretty expensive to do that. There's Dino, that's Greta's husband. There's Greta. That's Ira, Hannah. This is Dave and Teresa. That is Dino's parents. They met us there as well. There's Linus. Okay, but one of the coolest things is when we got there, I had no idea this was happening, but they had a group there, and I forget the name of the group, but it's a group of old people that like to go places and learn stuff. And they had a very special guest speaker that night, and I literally flipped out because this guy is Rolf Peterson. Rolf Peterson is the guy that started the predator-prey relationship in the early 60s. and he's been studying the relationship between wolves and moose, okay, since the beginning. And so when I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like getting my picture taken with like the, I don't know, Post Malone in my head, you know, like someone like super cool. And so he said, so he was like, oh, where are you from? I said, Indiana. And this guy's a Purdue guy. So he was like super stoked to talk about Indiana. Okay, so oh, there's just a couple of other pictures of the boys. Oh, I do have to show this. This is a really ridiculous picture, but coming up. But Ira and I decided one day, I can't remember where everybody else was, but we decided to go on a little walk. And he found a robin's egg. He was pretty stoked about that. And on our walk, we found the superintendent of the park. Now, this is also like, this was like doubly super awesome for me because I never met a superintendent of the park. Okay, these people are not really public people unless it's like a huge thing, but this is the, like, there's only, 60 national parks, well, less than that. And there's only one superintendent for each one of those. So like, it's an elite crew. And I recognized this woman's face from a video that I watched about Isle Royale and wolves. And so I went up to her and I said, hey, hello, nice to meet you, Miss Superintendent. And she goes, oh, it's nice to meet you. And it was just me and Ira. And I said, would you mind taking a picture with my son? And she goes, sure. Do you mind if I pick him up? And I was like, sure, but I don't think she realized how fat this kid is and like how heavy he is. Like he's just a little chunkers, And when she picked him, yes, it was the most awkward thing ever. This is the first picture, then this is the second picture. I think she was like, I think I'm gonna fall over. And she's muscly, but I mean he's a big kid. So I was super stoked to meet her. Okay, so over time, I'm going to show you a little graph, what's happened with the wolves in the park, and then I'm going to tell you a little story about what's happening now. Okay, so this line right here, okay, this comes from the journal Science. It shows the wolves here and the moose here. So look what's happened. This is 1959. Okay, so he started right there around 1960. Okay, this was the population. Wolves were high, moose were low. Look what happens when the wolf population goes down. The moose population goes up. Okay. Now the wolf population goes up. The moose population goes down. Okay. So as this moose population goes up, the wolf population goes down. So I think you're starting to see a little bit of a trend. Now I want to show you a clip, not this whole thing, but I want you to see what the folks are doing right now with these wolves.
Isle Royale is an island, a rather remote island in the middle of Lake Superior, the biggest freshwater lake in the world. And on this island are a population of wolves and moose. And these wolves and moose interact with one another as predator and prey, with the wolves eating the moose and the moose's primary cause of death being the wolves. They've been there for about 50 years together, interacting in this way. And for about the same amount of time, for 50 years, researchers from Michigan Tech University have been studying those interactions. The longer we study things on Isle Royale, the more and more we realize that our original understandings, they weren't very good. In fact, they're just plain old wrong. And the only way to get that is by continuing to watch, to see that as it unfolds, it's a bit different than what you had previously thought. For many, many decades, we thought Isle Royale wolves were isolated, inbred, and showed no bad signs of that inbreeding. And you couldn't be more wrong than to find out, well, they're not so isolated and they also suffer from this inbreeding. In a normal wolf population, about 1 in 100 wolves would have some spinal type of deformity. On Isle Royale, it's about 1 in 3 wolves. So the 30 times higher rate of deformities. The other related thing is we thought for many, many decades that the wolves on Isle Royale were completely isolated. Well, we just recently this year found out that's not quite so true either. For about the last 13 years, we've been collecting the scats of wolves. From those scats, we can get DNA, and from the DNA, we can get DNA fingerprints and more or less identify one wolf from another and figure out who the brothers and sisters are and other family relationships, males and females, all that stuff we can get from these DNA. Well, what we discovered just in the past year is something that happened more than 13 years ago. In the year 1997, a wolf from Canada had come to Isle Royale. We knew about the identity of this wolf for a long time. We just never knew his heritage. We knew about him because he was really quite a spectacular wolf. He was physically larger than all the other wolves on Isle Royale. He was the leader of Middle Pack, which became one of the largest packs Isle Royale had ever seen under his leadership. His apparent superiority is one of the most strong signs you could ask for, that the wolves on Isle Royale had in fact been suffering from inbreeding depression, that they weren't doing so well, because relatively speaking, he was that much better. Isle Royale has been showing us the two things that it's best at showing us. One is it shows us how easy it is for ecologists to get it wrong, how easy it is for ecologists to misunderstand how nature actually works. The other thing that Isle Royale is good at showing us is how it is that we need to think deeply about our relationship with nature in general. And how that comes into play has to do with, in the last 3 or 4 years, the wolves on Isle Royale have been doing relatively poor. They've had quite a difficult time of it. Basically, if we go back to just a couple of years ago, say early 2009, there were 4 packs on Isle Royale and about 30 wolves on the island.
Okay, so this is obviously an old video, right? So let's fast forward. About 3 years ago, there were only 2 wolves left, a father and a daughter. Okay, and yes, they did try to mate. Okay, daughter didn't want to have anything to do with that. Okay, obviously would not produce a viable offspring. Okay, so what do you think would happen to the wolf population in Isle Royale if we only have those 2 left? What do you think is going to happen to those?
It would die off, the moose would just increase.
Yeah, it's kind of like this thing. We've run out of species. We've run out of, boom, they're all going to die, right? So then what's going to happen to the moose population? It's going to skyrocket. It's going to J curve. It's going to exponential growth. Okay, so what if you were manager of this park? If you were superintendent of this park, what's something that you could do? Yeah, Zach. Bingo. You should be manager of this park, because that's exactly what they decided to do. Let's get a couple more wolves and bring them in and reintroduce them. Now, you would think that would be the easiest thing on the planet. Let's just bring them in. But it took about 2 years to have the discussion of whether or not to bring these in. And they had to do a public forum. They had to go through all of these different legal processes. And finally, they decided. And there was a lot of back. What's that? Yes, but it's not as easy as you think. There's a lot of paperwork involved. Yeah, Trace.
So, they were talking about the spinal deformities.
Yeah.
Like hurting and killing.
Yeah, so it's like a lot of times when animals get inbred, they'll have some sort of deformity that ends up like killing them. But for the most part, it's like wolves die. Well, do you guys remember when the weather was like 35 below and we were out for school like for 2 weeks? You guys would have been maybe like 5th grade,
Yeah.
5th grade, somewhere around there. Okay, yeah, it was like warning, you couldn't even go outside. It was nuts. Okay, that year, every single Great Lake froze over. And so they were crossing their fingers that there would be wolves that would come down from Canada across the ice. Because if you look, it was like, it's super close, right? So all they'd have to do is, just hopefully walk over. Well, what ended up happening is, from there to there, that's a long distance, but still it's doable, okay, for a wolf. Here's what happened, unfortunately. 1 wolf left, a couple wolves died, boom, there was disease. Next thing you know, that population tanks, okay? So they did decide to bring them in, and 1 died right away, but they finally had their first offspring, and so things are starting to change. Why would they be concerned? Like, who cares? Like, so what? What if the moose population just goes crazy? Maybe we don't need wolves. Like, wolves weren't always there, moose always weren't there. Okay, but why would people care? Jack?
There wouldn't be many plants.
Yeah, right.
Smaller rodents or
Right. So that trophic cascade. So all these plants that you're seeing here, okay, these are lichens. All of these would be gone. okay, the browse line for some of these cypress trees gone. They would literally take over these orchids. By the way, we ran into a guy, this orchid, this Ram's Head orchid. We saw a guy there, he's probably 70 years old. He said he'd been waiting his entire life to see this orchid. And now that he's seen it, he could officially die. And I was like, oh God, that's morbid, but cool. You know, like, but all of this, yeah, oh yeah, no joke. So all of this stuff, right? All of this beauty, okay, is gone, okay, because you guys well know in Indiana that deer are very similar. And there are places in Indiana, you can go in the woods and you can literally see the browse line, okay? You know what I mean by browse line? Where they walk. Not where they walk, where they can eat, okay? Yeah, they can only go so far, right? So there's some spots, especially I remember in Pokagon State Park before they started having an annual hunt there. You could go in the woods and you could literally see nothing but bear underneath these trees where all the deer were eating that vegetation, right? So they've decided to bring in the wolves, and we don't know what's going to happen yet. We don't know if the population is going to rebound or if it's going to be fine. We don't know what's going to happen to the moose population. But if you look at these numbers, they're quite incredible. We're talking about up to the top 50 wolves, but then we're talking the moose population, 2,500 moose, right? That's a lot of moose. Okay, and if you remember the video yesterday when we started talking about how, you know, the elk population at Yellowstone National Park, how the rivers changed once we brought those back because the elk just weren't staying around. Water pollution decreased quite a bit. So I want to go back to these two pictures here, okay, and look at either exponential growth, where things are just going to keep going, and then eventually crash, okay? Or are we going to limit the growth by saying, okay, this is how much food we have, this is how much oxygen we have, this is how much land we have, and populations tend to level out. Now, I will tell you, thanks for paying attention, it's not like, okay, see this line called carrying capacity? Okay, it's not like if I'm a wolf population and I'm like, I'm growing, J-curve, and then just hit the wall, right? And try to go. It's not like this is a stopping point. Are you all with me on that? Okay, there is an overshoot, okay? But if I'm a wolf population and if I go above this line, what's going to happen to my population? I'm going to die, right? And then I'm going to grow, and it's going to end up being like a little vacillating back and forth. So imagine this doorway right here being the line of saying like, okay, if I go past that line, I'm going to die. So I'm a wolf population, and I'm like going way out here, okay? I'm not going to live. Okay? So I'm going to die off. My population is going to die off. You think I'm going to go as far back? No. I'm going to kind of try to stay around this line, right? Because I know, okay, I can only support some. What happens with death? Sure, it's disease. Sure, it's predation. But a lot of times it's like, man, I can't feed my babies. If I can't feed my babies, what's going to happen to my babies? They're going to die. They're going to die, right? Okay, so this line is called carrying capacity. This is called logistic growth, the S curve. This is a J curve exponential growth. Thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate it.